2018 State House Candidate Forum. The Voter Education Coalition is a nonpartisan organization that sponsors candidate forums, meet and greets, and other events to educate citizens about candidates and their policies. You can learn more about VEC events by visiting their Facebook page at facebook.com/VECDGKS. This forum is being televised live on Midco Channel 25 and is streaming live on the city's YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/LawrenceKSVIDEO video /. It will be available for later viewing at the same YouTube location. We'd like to thank the City of Lawrence and their staff for the use of the City Commission meeting room and their help in making this event possible. My name is Ann Gardner. I'm going to be your moderator today, and I have my trusty timekeeper, Julie Hack, with me here, so she'll be holding up the cards for you. The rules of the forum are pretty simple. I'm going to ask the questions that have been submitted by VEC partners, and then from the audience members who are here, each question has a designated response time. At the end of that time, you'll hear the bell from Julie, and we'll rotate the order of our responses so that everybody gets a chance to answer first. We're trying something a little bit different this time. We're giving all the candidates, and we notified them of this in advance, that we're going to give them 5 minutes to kind of say whatever they want to introduce themselves and issues that they're concerned about at the beginning of the forum. And then we have designated three topics that were selected by VEC that we'll ask questions on, and the candidates were notified about that in advance too. And those 3 topics are the Department of Children and Families, mental health services in the state, and voting in elections. So we let them know in advance so they could decide one way or another how much time they wanted to spend on their opening remarks. So I think we're ready to get going. We have candidates for 2 seats in the Kansas House of Representatives. These are the 2 seats that are contested and have districts that reach into Douglas County. First, we have the candidates for the 42nd District, Jim Carlskent, who's a Republican, and Thea Perry, who is a Democrat. This district covers Eudora and then that corner of Douglas County, and then reaches up into Leavenworth County. And then in the 45th District, we have Mike Amex, the Democrat, and Cynthia Smith, the Republican. And that district is generally west of Lawrence and kind of wraps a little bit to the south and north outside city limits or on the edges of Lawrence. And with that, I think we will just get started with our 5-minute statements. Jim, you can give it a start.
Okay. Thank you, and thanks to the Voter Education Coalition for hosting today, and also the City of Lawrence for providing the staff and the facilities for this. It's a great opportunity to be here. A little bit about myself. I'm as was mentioned earlier, I'm from the 42nd District, running for the House of Representatives. This is my second time to run for this seat. I ran in 2016 for this spot, and I think my main reason for running in 2016 was a frustration with what was going on in state government. I felt like that there were things that needed to be done that weren't being done, and it was frustrating me. So that's why I decided to run, and I ran against the incumbent. Was fortunate enough to win, and then in the general, I also was fortunate enough to win. My background probably has a lot to do with why I chose to run in 2016. I'm a career educator. I've been in the field of education for over 40 years. Part of that in parochial schools, is in the remainder of it in public schools, and I was also a consultant working in education. And during those years, I saw the education funding go down, down, and down. During the Brownback tax experiment, when the state was hurting, the block grant came into existence, and the block grant basically froze schools at the level they were at. And if we were a growing school district, it hurt you. If you were a district and with declining enrollment, it didn't hurt you as much. And that was probably my primary reason. Also, I could see things going that were with respect to the roads, with respect to a lot of other things. Mental health, and that will probably be mentioned, discussed, later. My as I said, my background was in education, but I grew up on a farm in southeast Kansas in Fort Scott. I I went into the military. I went to Vietnam. I was fortunate enough to get the Bronze Star while I was in Vietnam. I have I'm supportive of the Second Amendment. Some of my more conservative colleagues don't feel I'm conservative enough, but I do feel like we have to exercise our right to the Second Amendment, but I think there's some key responsibilities that we have with respect to the Second Amendment also. I am a pro-life voter. I've been endorsed by the Kansas for Life. With respect to other endorsements that I've received back to education, I have been endorsed by the KNEA and also Game On for Kansas schools. I think some of the primary things that we need to be talking about and looking towards as we get into the election in 2018 and what the legislature will be facing, we first of all continue to address the issue around education. The Supreme Court has said that what we did in the legislature in 17 and 18 wasn't quite enough, and we need to basically put the cost of living increase in the formula. And I think that's something that that we can do. We've been fortunate enough to have some surpluses with respect to our tax revenues ever since the middle of this year. So we do have a surplus there. In 2017, when we voted to override the Brownback, the veto that Governor Brownback made, we reset the tax structure. Many people say it was it was the biggest tax increase we've ever had. It wasn't as much as what Kansas were paying in 2012 before the tax experiment started. So I consider it a reset. One of the things that I was opposed to, and when I ran in 2016, was the LLCs not having to pay anything, and that was taken out of the tax structure. This past year in 2018, the legislature was able to appropriate dollars towards education, dollars towards for the state highways. We put money back into capers that we owed and continue to owe. And as I conclude my remarks, I feel like that in 2017 and 2018, we put Kansas right on the back on the right track, and that's why I'm running for re-election, is continue what we've done and the positive things we've done. Thank you.
Okay, next we'll go to Thea Perry.
Thank you. And thank you to the Voter Education Coalition and your partners for having us here today. I am a seventh-generation Kansan, originally from Palmer, Kansas. I remained in the area here for the last 16 years after I graduated from KU, and I live with my husband and my daughters Sabina, who is 12, and Lyda, who's 7, in rural Leavenworth County near Reno Township. I'm a proud graduate of public schools and a staunch supporter of public education. I served for 2 years as PTO president at my daughter's school, and I saw firsthand the severe impact of the Brownback tax experiment and education funding cuts. So this prompted me to become more politically active. I started attending legislative hearings in the State House, and I joined the 60-mile walk to Topeka to bring more awareness to school funding restoration. And the connections that I made there led me to begin exploring and advocating for issues beyond just education. And I ended up becoming kind of a coalition builder. I worked with people and organizations across the aisle, in the state, and also in DC. My volunteering and organizing work has united me with people directly impacted by the problems facing our state, giving me insight and competence required to lead. I proudly serve on several boards, including the Lawrence Community Shelter, which provides services to Douglas County residents. I've organized dozens of voter registration drives, candidate and community forums, donation drives, and other community gatherings. Most recently, I served as the outreach director for a nonprofit organization in Topeka that focuses on civic engagement. My endorsements include the Mainstream Coalition, the KNEA, American Federation of Teachers, Kansas Families for Education, the AFL-CIO, the Teamsters, Sierra Club, Kansans Advancing Women, the Kansas Women's Political Caucus, and Equality Kansas. I believe that we need more dialogue and less partisanship in Topeka. I have the collaborative skills and leadership experience to move that needle. I'm running to increase access to quality health care, invest in education for future generations, restore responsible fiscal policy, and ensure our leaders are held accountable to the people of Kansas.
Okay, thank you. Now we're going to move to the 45th District and Mike Amex.
Thanks, Ann, and I want to thank the coalition also. This is always a great day to be involved with the forums that the coalition puts on. You know, I've had the opportunity to have a number of people ask me, what brings me here today? Now, it's no secret that I've served several terms in local government, including several terms on the Lawrence City Commission, multiple terms as mayor, member of the County Commission, 2 terms as chairman of the County Commission. I was appointed as chair of the Kansas Board of Barbering, which is a fee-funded agency that licenses barbers in the state by both Governors Finney and Sebelius. I'm a member of the Board of Trustees for Lawrence Memorial Hospital. I'm a board of trustees for First United Methodist Church. So I've got a lot of background in local government and local committees that I serve on, and some of the things that I've been involved with gives me the opportunity to have contact with great numbers of people throughout the district. You know, the 45th District is a wonderful place to be involved with. I mean, it truly is. The people are great. The natural resources that we have throughout the community are just wonderful. But while I've been doing a number of the visits in the 45th District and a number of the people that, you know, that I've had that opportunity to talk with, one person was really important. That was my wife. Now, back in January, many of you will recall, I had decided not to run for the Lawrence City Commission again. And it was probably time for me to limit my own terms and to leave City Hall. It was a great privilege to be able to be as an elected individual in the city of Lawrence, as it was with the county. But during that time, I had the time to talk to Marilyn, and we decided that it was probably a good idea that I would run. Tom Sloan was leaving, and who had done a great job in our district, but it was time for me to go and run for this job, and that's what I've done. I talked to people in Lecompton, I talked to people in Lawrence, I talked to people in Lone Star, I talked to a number of the people in the rural, all the way around the city of Lawrence, and had that opportunity and decided to go ahead and run. You know, one of the biggest things that you have to ask yourself anytime that you're getting ready to change jobs, can I do this job? And folks, I believe I can do this job. I have, like I say, I have a strong background in local government that I can take to Topeka, and I think that that's something that's very important. So today, I'm asking voters for that opportunity to be able to represent them in Topeka, be able to look at a number of things that I've been involved with, and some of the things that are important to me for the future. Like, you know, like 2 colleagues to the right talked about education. Education is so important. It's important for our workforce. I've had the opportunity to be endorsed by KNEA. You know, it's important for the future. But one of the things about education, and we look through K through 12, we also have to talk about the importance of secondary education and where we go after we go to high school. And one of the things that happens is that, you know, college is, you know, it's something that's very important to a lot of people, but at the same time, technical education is so important also, and we can't forget that. That is something that, you know, a direction that I decided to go, and I think that that is important also. Fixing our infrastructure. Infrastructure today, as we talk about bridges and roads, you know, it's the solid, you know, the concrete infrastructure. But one of the things that's important as we talk about that, there's a big project that's important to all of Douglas County, and specifically the 45th District, and that is the 4-laning of K-10 Highway. That is a project that is huge. If nothing else, it is for safety and being able to finish that roadway. The connection at Wakarusa Drive and being able to make that right as it goes across K-10 because of the safety of the YSC ball fields. And recreation area is going to be something that is so important. At the same time, we need to protect. Farmers Turnpike and make sure that we don't change any of that. Another big part of infrastructure is making sure that high-speed internet is available to folks in the rural part of the county. And then last, something that's important to me, and I know it was to Representative Sloan, is adequate and water supply for the future. So as we look at silt problems that we have at Clinton Lake, being a former mayor, obviously water was something that was very important to me and continues to be so. So we'll look at all kinds of things there. But I want to thank everybody today for having me.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll go to Cynthia Smith.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Smith. I've lived in Lawrence for 23 years. I have a degree in economics and a law degree from a top 25 law school. I started working with the Kansas legislature in the 1990s for Kansas City Power and Light, and then for the Sisters of Charity of Leavenworth Health System, which is a group of faith-based hospitals and safety net clinics. That's how I know Representative Tom Sloan, who is retiring from the legislature. He supports my campaign to take his place in the State House. My husband Scott is a teacher at Free State High School. So healthcare, energy, education, and how to get things done in the State House, I know a lot about. The backbone of my campaign is that I will be a good steward of taxpayer dollars. We need to live within our means as a state. I won't be the spend and tax politician my opponent has been, which has caused us to be overtaxed. We are overtaxed in Kansas. It's ludicrous, for example, to have a tax on food of nearly 10%. That's crazy high. That's one example of a tax I would eliminate or reduce. My opponent has said, oh, not sure we should do that. We might want to have that money to spend. You've heard only how he wants to spend money. Well, I would work to reduce taxes, to do that by measuring the success and the value of government programs so we can identify where we are wasting taxpayer dollars. I will also be scrutinizing every new spending proposal with that in mind. I will work to make the economic picture in Kansas one that has healthy businesses, good employment, and brings new opportunities. I want laws that allow Kansans to prosper. Finally, I want Lawrence and Douglas County to matter in Topeka. That's why I'm running. Know this, if Lawrence sends another Democrat to the State House, we won't have any voice, we won't have any say in what decisions are made in Topeka. I'll say that again, if Lawrence sends another Democrat to the State House, we won't have any voice. The Republicans decide the agenda and decide what bills will be worked on. Legislative leaders know me, will listen to me, will work with me, but not with a freshman Democrat, and that's a fact. My opponent offers experience on the City Commission and the County Commission, but I say the State House shouldn't be a reward for serving on the City Commission. It's too important. And look at the messes the city has gotten into, being swindled out of our tax dollars by developers, or being sucked into bad deals for the city, or just plain mistakes. These are things that happened on his watch, and he has to take ownership of those messes. He sat on the board of the hospital that gave the CEO of our city-owned hospital a $100,000 bonus. We cannot take that kind of recklessness to Topeka. I have the experience and the record of problem solving in the State House. I have relationships from working in the State House, and legislative leaders support my campaign. Most importantly, I will have the influence with the majority party to do things. A new Democrat who is unknown and will go unnoticed by legislative leadership will just take up seat and not probably get anything done at all. While I am the most qualified candidate, I don't take this opportunity for granted. I walk neighborhoods in the district every night and every weekend and go to events out in the county, talking and listening to voters. What I have found, and what Representative Sloan's success demonstrates, is that my moderate Republican views align with most voters in the district. We'll talk more about that. Among the organizations and membership PACs that have endorsed or provided support for my campaign are Traditional Republicans for Common Sense. This is a Kansas coalition of more than 70 formerly elected Republican officials who have served the citizens of Kansas. Other supporters, the Kansas Hospital Association, the Kansas Bankers Association, the Kansas Agribusiness Council, the Builders Association and Builder Contractors of America, Renew Kansas, the Kansas Beverage Association, the Kansas Optometric Association, HCA Kansas Good Government Fund, Evergy, which is our new electric utility, Johnson & Johnson. In addition, many friends from Lawrence and Douglas County and the State House have provided support for my campaign. They know me and know that I will be a great legislator. This support gives me the opportunity to run and helps me get the word out about my campaign, but that they know it will not influence my votes. I'm Cynthia Smith, and I'm the candidate that will make Lawrence and Douglas County matter in the State House. I ask for your vote.
Okay, thank you. We're ready to move to our questions, and we're going to go first to Mike Amex with this question. It's about the Department of Children and Families, and the question is, what is the long-term solution for ensuring the safety of children in foster care? Do you favor revising the current system or a complete overhaul? No, I'm sorry, it's a 3-minute answer on those, up to.
Quite honestly, after reading as much as I have in the last week anyway, one of the things, we need some kind of overhaul system. I don't know if it's a complete overhaul, but something needs to happen. We have children sleeping in offices and you know, kids just slipping through the cracks. I mean, it's really a sad situation. And to allow it to go any farther than that, you know, would be wrong. There was a Kansas City Star article this morning that talked about the number of cases that social workers are have on their plate right now, and I think that the number was like 55, and that they are supposed to have somewhere in the neighborhood of about 15 cases that they're carrying forward. That's not right. You know, it's not right at all. You know, so an overhaul has to happen there. It seems to me that when we look at this, and we look at like Wichita, now they hired more people, and one of the things that happened there is I think in an article, it may have been in today's article, one I read earlier, their cases actually reduced from 51 to 31 or some number like that. So, you know, it is going to be about people. It is going to be about making those hires that are important so that we're able to carry it out. But I do think that one of the things that's going to have to happen, and you know, it's probably the same for the first two questions that we're going to talk about, both DCF and mental health, is that a statement, you know, we are going to have to be back in control of what our responsibilities are, and that is to, you know, kids in our mental health system. I mean, it's just got to be. And I think that that's where, you know, we're really, we're not doing it right. So, yeah, in answer to your question, I think if not a complete overhaul, an overhaul has got to happen.
Okay, and next to Cynthia Smith.
As I've said before, I'm actually trained as a court-appointed special advocate, so I already knew a lot about the foster care system. I even worked for the National CASA Association in Washington, D.C. I was just trained in Douglas County this year. I had been trained in Washington, D.C., but I'm looking forward to being assigned a child. I think the agency is already undergoing an overhaul. We have great new leadership in Gina Meyer-Hummel. She was just appointed in 2017. She's from the trenches. She worked for the shelter. She worked for the Kansas Department of Aging. She was more than a decade with KVC, which is one of the foster care providers other than St. Francis. She has a good plan. She has 5 goals that she wants the agency to meet, and she's getting that done. I do know that the legislature has had several different committees and task force on foster care advocacy and have come up with some good ideas. I agree they've just barely scratched the surface in the things that can be done to improve the system and be sure that children are well cared for. From that came, for example, the new law about releasing records of fatalities of children in custody. We have to be on top of that. They also assigned more FTEs for compliance and for foster home licensing. There's also good work being done by Peggy Mass. She's a former legislator and a former foster mother. She's been recruited to recruit more foster homes, and she's doing really good work with that. Reunification is the goal for the foster care system. That needs to continue to be really important. So I think we're well on our way to doing a good job to reforming the foster care system within the Department of Children and Families, and I look forward to supporting the efforts by the new leadership there.
All right, thank you. We'll move to the 42nd District and go first to Thea.
Okay. Improving operations at the DCF is one of the most important things that the legislature is going to work on next year and probably for the next several years. You know, Mr. Amex is correct. We still have kids sleeping on floors with nowhere to go. 7 children have been murdered while they were wards of the state. We are failing our most vulnerable children. Most of the problems facing the DCF ultimately stem from the fact that there is too much work for the people to be able to handle that work. So I believe that we need to hire more trained professionals, including caseworkers. Whistleblowers should not be penalized or fired when they are trying to protect children. I think that the oversight committee that was formed in the last session is a great first step, but it's not enough. Transparency and reporting is critical. And I'd also like to see more training and resources for community reporters.
Okay, and Mr. Carlskin.
Thank you. You know, the three previous people have basically said a lot of the same things. You know, and the bottom line is that I really feel like that Gina is doing the right things. But when she inherited DCF, it was a mess. She's taken time, she's diligently gone about attempting to correct things. She met with the legislatures. I met with her 2 or 3 times last year and talked about, okay, where are things going to change? And she's making steps in the right direction. You know, it took us a while to get in the hole we're in, and it's going to take us a while to get out. As was mentioned earlier, we need more people, especially caseworkers, because as Mr. Amex mentioned, you know, in the article this morning, you know, when you've got 55, you know, cases assigned to one person, it's just, you know, virtually impossible. So it's going to take more people. People take money. It's unfortunate, as was mentioned, kids are suffering. We need more homes. We need more people to monitor things. It's a process, but I think we're on the right track. You know, Governor Collier has appointed some good people to make some changes in state government. He's going to leave, and who knows who's going to replace him, but I hope whoever replaces him is able to keep the quality of people that he's got in, for example, with Gina, and also, you know, with the other agencies that he's appointed heads to. So to sum things up, we need more people, but it's going to take resources to do it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move to our next question, also a 3-minute answer, and we'll go first to Thea Perry with this one. It's about mental health services. Over the last decade, much of the responsibility for mental health care has shifted from the state to local government. What improvements to the mental health system would you recommend?
I believe that in order for economically vulnerable Kansans to maintain access to mental health care, we need to expand Medicaid. A very large percentage of Medicaid funding is used for mental health services. Expanding access to quality, affordable health care is morally and economically necessary. And this is something that has been kind of a part of my life for a long time. I was raised in a rural part of the state. I was the child of a doctor and a nurse, and we lived pretty far away from the closest hospital, and so we got a lot of phone calls and knocks on our door when something was happening in our area with our neighbors. Maybe somebody was having a baby and they weren't going to make it to the hospital, or somebody had had a stroke. My parents always obliged. They never asked for anything in return, and I learned from my parents growing up that healthcare is something that everybody needs, and we take care of our neighbors because it's the right thing to do. In Kansas, we have many small clinics and hospitals on the brink of closing. Last week, it was announced that Fort Scott's Mercy Hospital will be closing. They've already lost one hospital in that area of the state already a few years ago in Independence. Some municipalities are actually allowing their medical facilities in their areas to forego paying their utility bills, because if they had to pay those bills, those facilities would be closed. By expanding Medicaid, we can save these healthcare providers and help them thrive. Kansas has paid more than $2 billion, actually I think it's up to about 2.7 or more at this point, into the federal Medicaid program, and that money goes to other states to pay for their Medicaid expansion instead of coming back to Kansans. Those federal dollars would provide health insurance for more than 150,000 Kansans in the coverage gap, most of whom work but cannot afford insurance. About 7,400 Kansas veterans and their spouses would gain access to quality, affordable health coverage with Medicaid expansion. Expanding access to health care is the right thing to do for Kansans, and it will keep small hospitals and clinics open, and it will provide mental health services.
Okay, thank you. We'll stay in the 42nd District and go to Mr. Carlskent.
Thank you. Yeah, as Tia mentioned, you know, the mental health is tied to a great deal to healthcare, you know, in general, you know, regarding, you know, and she went into a great amount of detail with respect to expansion of Medicaid. In 2017, you know, there's a bill that went through the legislature to expand it. It was passed by the House and the Senate. It went to the governor and it was vetoed. Governor Brownback was successful in his veto. The House failed to override the veto. I voted for both of those. And in 2018, there was an attempt to what was called a gut and go, and I voted against the gut and go. A lot of it had to do with the gut and go is not the right legislative process to bring that type of legislation. It wasn't heard, you know, through committee, and I think we could have done better to what was on the table. I do think there's a lot of things that can be done. I would support you know, expansion, which would help the mental health piece as well. You know, there's a lot of conversation about, okay, you know, what happened in Fort Scott with the closing of the hospital there. You know, I grew up in Fort Scott. I've got 4 brothers and 1 sister there. 300 people are going to lose their jobs down there. I spent 14 years in Independence, Kansas, where they closed that hospital there. There were 300 people lost their jobs there. If we do this right and with an expansion, we can help the economy of the state of Kansas. So this started out with a mental health thing, and mental health is one piece of the overall puzzle that you know, that healthcare with respect to Kansas. You know, I'm on the K-12 Education Budget Committee. Schools, you know, when I was in schools, I saw what mental health needs were. We put approximately $10 million into a pilot project working with schools in mental health to help kids. So I think we understand what's going on. We understand the needs with respect to mental health, and it's across the state. It's all over, from the smallest school to the largest school, to the smallest community to the largest community. We have a lot of needs in mental health. And as I said earlier, you know, we need to take this it took us a while to get in this hole. We need to start working our way out of it. And so that's how I would approach it. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move to the 45th District and start with Cynthia Smith.
There are a lot of barriers to access to mental health treatment in the mental health system. Some of these are personal, or whether there's enough beds, or whether people can afford it, or whether they're concerned about the stigma that's attached to it, transportation. A lot of these are access issues, access to care. I think telemedicine is one answer for that will work in Kansas, because it will give a lot of people more access to mental health services. I also support the Medicaid expansion. I mean, I worked in healthcare. I can't unlearn what I learned working for a safety net health system. And I think we do need Medicaid expansion. And then we also need to be sure our Medicaid contractors are doing what they've been contracted to do and doing it on time. The healthcare, the mental health system has been shifted to community mental health care providers. And I know Douglas County agencies are working together, and they're making a lot of progress with integration of mental health and other health, the whole person care, and that's great. I'm concerned about some of the blips they've had with the staffing, but hopefully they'll work that out and continue to make some progress. The mental health court in Douglas County just started in 2016, so that's been very helpful, because a lot of the mental health and what people that are incarcerated, there's a lot of overlap there. a lot of people that are incarcerated, it's because of mental health issues. There's also a new law in the books from the state, the Mental Health Intervention Team, and that's asking the schools to partner on mental health services, and that has a lot of potential for success. But one thing that we have coming at us that we need to be ready for, and I think the legislature knows this, is the opioid crisis. It has yet to fully hit Kansas, but it's really going to affect our capacity to deal with mental health cases, and it's going to affect our jails. It's going to affect our foster care system. Everything that we do, it's going to be very expensive. So we need to get a handle on that as a state. There's a lot of things other states are doing that have already been hit with it, mostly around treatment, trying to be sure things like that the naloxone, I think that's how it's pronounced, that there's access to that. They're even doing things like training people who are in jails how to administer it, just to try to reduce the number of overdoses. There's federal grant money available that the state has already tapped into. There's a waiver under Medicaid that we can tap into to get us more resources to deal with that. But they can also bring lawsuits against the manufacturers. Some other states have started that, and I think that's something that the state ought to watch. But that opioid crisis is really going to affect our mental health capacity, and we need to be ready for that as a state, and I look forward to working on that when I join the legislature.
Thank you. And Mike Amex.
And not long ago, I would have to say one thing about the state of Kansas. I think that we were a world-class leader in mental health service. We had Menninger's Foundation, we had great state hospitals, and one of the things that happened was Menninger's moved and we started closing hospitals. We kind of lost control. And one of the things that has happened is that the state has sent that back to the counties and to local governments to be able to handle those situations. The sad part about it is that we have a great county commission down here that's doing everything that they possibly can to take care of folks who are having a problem, mental health issues, those kind of things. But one of the things that we're talking about, and Cynthia's right, we've got opioid to deal with, but some of the things that we have going on right now, we have, and I'm on the board of trustees of the hospital, and one of the things that's important, and I do support expansion of Medicaid, because quite honestly, if you do the formula, we have, with an expanded Medicaid program, we would have about 9,900 people from our service area that could be approved or allowed service under an expanded Medicaid program. So one of the things that happens is that that's real dollars to the hospital. Right now we have a lot of people, and Lord help them, because the truth of the matter is the place that they get health service is at our emergency room. Those are real dollars, real costs, to all of our service area and the providers that we have and insurance companies, everything. But the truth is those are real dollars. Those things have to happen, to have a strong mental health services in our state. The sad part again is that we need to come up with a new plan on how we're going to deal both with DCF and mental health services. We need a commitment to health. We need an absolute commitment to health. And the only way that we're going to be able to do that, and one big start, is going to be the expansion of Medicaid. Locals, like I said, are doing a great job of trying to answer the question, but I don't think it's going to be tough just because of the amount of money that it's going to take. But, this is a great first step and something that I plan to support. But I do think that it's not right. It's the state's responsibility to carry this out, and we need to be doing that in the legislature.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is about election processes. We're still going to do a 3-minute answer on this, and we'll go first to Cynthia Smith with this answer. What are your thoughts on state election laws and processes? Should the laws be more uniform among counties? Would you advocate for any changes to the State Election Commission?
Actually, as part of my being a good steward of taxpayer dollars, I don't think we need to invest any more taxpayer dollars on this issue. I think Scott Schwab is going to make a great Secretary of State. I think he's going to temper some of the toxicity that's been coming out of our Secretary of State's office in recent years. Kansas has a relatively good system, actually, of voting in elections, especially regarding election security, because we have multiple systems in place. It's strange, but Some of the paper ballots are still considered to be the most secure and the most reliable voting systems. It's pretty easy to register to vote, to register online. Maybe in the future, we'll have more streamlined ways to register the same day. The state does get some money to look at these kinds of things. I'm not sure we're ready for that because there are some electronic blips, I guess, in our elections, but I think we're likely to get past that. We do have a voting security policy in Kansas that you're not allowed to connect to the network or to the internet. There's strict access requirements to the voting machines where they use them. We have diagnostics that are done on our voting devices, and they're kept locked up. So we have a pretty good security policy. And again, Kansas uses a mixture of voting devices, and that makes it not only the most secure where we can verify election results, but it's also easier to upgrade them in phases. Some of the states that have gone to more uniform systems find that when it comes time to replace all of it, then they can't afford it. So the way Kansas is doing things actually has been a good way to do it. But there are other states that have activity on security that I think we should pay attention to and see if there's anything that we should adopt.
Okay, Mr. Amex.
Quite honestly, Cynthia and I are going to disagree here, and I'll tell you why, because I think Brian McClendon will make a great Secretary of State. I think he is somebody who will actually read the job description and do what he's supposed to be doing. Quite honestly, it's kind of hard to argue the points that were brought up, by my opponent. But I think that we have good safeguards in place. Also, I think that there's a number of things that have been done to make it secure, make it so that it works. One of the things that we have is Jamie Hsu locally, spend time with him and realize that. We have great opportunities with him in making sure that he carries out the functions and the responsibility as being the head of elections in Douglas County especially, but also information that, he's able to provide, to so many locales, being part of association that they're with. So that helps me feel secure about what's going on in the state as far as elections. There's no... Recently, we had a change in the way city commission elections were held, and rather going from the spring to the fall. I had a real problem with that. I thought there was going to be a loss of identity and those kind of things, which I still believe that there probably is. But the truth is that when you look at the last election, the turnout was a little higher. So I guess we'll stay where we are. But no, I'm pretty secure with everything that's going on now.
Okay. And we'll go next to the 42nd District with Jim Carlson.
Okay, thank you. Regarding elections, in the legislature last year, we looked at some things. A couple bills were passed. I think one of the things that needs to be done is to look at why, after the primary, 25 counties, it took them so long to get reports in. We need to work on that. And I don't know who will be the Secretary of State. I don't have a crystal ball, whether it be, Scott or Brian. I do know Scott personally. He was Speaker Pro Tem in the House, very knowledgeable man, knows the rules, and would do a great job. So, I think we have the skeleton for a good system, and I think it needs to be tweaked. But that's one of the things that we can look at. As Mike mentioned regarding, the local clerks here in Douglas County, Jamie does a great job. Leavenworth County, Janet Klaczynski up there. I think for the 42nd district, I think we're kept informed, and the voters in the two counties are fortunate to have the dedicated people they have. So, in looking ahead to the legislative session, elections committee needs to take a look to see how we can best adjust some of the errors that took place or is taking place. So,
Okay, and finally to Thea.
Thank you. Just real quick, I want to go back to the previous question, something that was said. Medicaid expansion was heard by committee this year. I know because I attended those committee hearings. Republican leadership wouldn't allow it to come to the floor. So while that was an attempt to amend, the same thing could be said about several bills, including the budget bill this last year. It was the only chance that we had to save people's lives, and people can't wait anymore for a perfect situation. To answer your question about elections, I believe that our elections should not be managed by political appointees, as they are now in the 4 most populated counties. The people who ensure fair, efficient, accessible elections should not owe their jobs to whomever is in power in Topeka. Instead, the position in these 4 counties should be elected, I believe. My opponent and I disagree on this. He's voted to increase the number of political appointees in state government and against direct election of election commissioners. I support laws that would make Kansas elections and voting simpler, available for audit, and less susceptible to error or manipulation. Unlike my opponent, I do not think proof of citizenship is necessary, because in signing a voter registration form, a person is swearing their citizenship on a legal document. Chris Kobach's crusade to disenfranchise voters by requiring proof of citizenship has caused tens of thousands, particularly seniors and young people, to be deleted from the voter rolls while stopping virtually no illegal voting. I support permanent advanced ballots available to those who request them, and paper ballots that are easily audited and recounted when necessary. I also support same-day voter registration, which is now done in 11 states. And I welcome all carefully considered ideas that would bring greater transparency to our democracy.
All right, thank you. We're now going to move to a short set of questions that were prepared in advance, but that weren't given to the candidates in advance. The first one is about House rules, and since Jim has already said something about gut and go, we're going to go to you first. The question is, the 2019 session will provide an opportunity to revise the House rules. Would you support elimination of the gut and go procedure in which all contents of a bill can be removed and replaced with new material? If you don't support complete elimination of the process, do you have any suggestions to update it? And we have up to 2 minutes for that answer.
Okay, thank you. With respect to the gut and go, I do not like the gut and go process. 2 years ago, in my first year, I had a bill that received 2 gut and goes. And here, my name was on a bill to expand racing when it was for a little Leavenworth County thing, and so I'm opposed to gut and go. I don't think that would make it with the majority of the people, because both sides of the aisle like the gut and go. But there needs to be tweaks to it as far as, putting the real contents in it, putting the name on it, and putting the person who really supported it, his name on it. Another thing with respect to, what takes place as rules is, I think more transparency needs to take place in the committee meetings. Right now, there's no requirements with respect to the votes in committee. I think for transparency purposes, when you vote yay or nay on an issue in committee, I think your name needs to go with it, because until you get to the legislature, you don't really understand what goes on in committees. Committees is the key to where a lot of things take place, and the committee chair has an incredible amount of power. But I do think that there would be more transparencies if you had your name on it, on that. On the vote that took place. So those are some of the things that I would support with respect to some changes within the legislative process.
Okay, and next to Thea Perry.
Sure. So the issue of transparency has been plaguing our state government. Not a single child should be lost in the foster care system, and we shouldn't wake up one morning and find a chicken processing plant moving in next door. Public information requests must be honored and not stonewalled. Good government requires transparency at every level. All committee hearings should be live streamed and recorded, and committee votes should be counted and recorded. I feel so strongly about this that as a part of my nonprofit work in the last few years, I have actually live streamed many key hearings myself. And yes, the gut and go process should be abolished, and bills should identify their sponsors. We deserve to know how our laws are being created and by whom. But as part of that reform, we also have to ensure that the legislature's Republican leadership can no longer block legislation they don't like. If other states can take this step toward transparency and accountability in their legislatures, so can we. In the last 2 years, we had opportunities to increase transparency and accountability. An amendment was introduced that would have created a cooling off period for 1 year for elected officials before they could become lobbyists in Kansas. My opponent voted against it, and a year before voted to double the maximum donation for Kansas House campaigns. More money in politics, letting elected officials jump immediately into lobbying, and more political appointees in government. These things do not increase transparency and accountability. They do the opposite.
Thank you, and then we'll go to the 45th District with Mr. Amex.
You know, gut and go should be gone, and names should be all over legislation as it comes forward. You know, as somebody who sat in this room and the public demands transparency of items that come before an elected body, those same kind of rules should be part of the discussion in Topeka. I mean, people need to know exactly what they're voting on. It can't be taken out at the end and some brand new thing come up. You know, there's got to be names on it. And Jim made a point. There's things that happen that are in committee, and that's where they come from. You know, sponsored names, everything should be, out there. The vote that happened, the names, should be recorded. Everything. I mean, the public has a right to know.
All right, and to Cynthia Smith.
I've worked with the legislature for a long time and navigated the system, and I find that it has a lot of transparency, actually. Regarding gut and go, I mean, it's been used on a bill that I've worked on against me, and I've made use of it. Actually, I haven't made use of it, a legislator has, and sometimes it would catch me by surprise, but I'd be pretty happy about it and also be pretty sad when a bill I worked on pretty hard was gutted. So, it'd be hard to get rid of it, because how would you decide what's a complete gut? I mean, you're allowed to amend a bill on the floor pretty extensively. At what point does it become a gut? And you still have to have the votes. You can gut a bill and put in new language, and you still have to have the votes to get it through. It's not like the legislators don't know what they're voting on. But if there are other alternatives that are workable, I'd be very interested in looking at them, because it is a pretty quirky system. It's a workaround, and we shouldn't have a workaround if we can come up with a better system. As far as transparency in the committee and the fact that you don't have to have a sponsor to get a bill moving in Kansas, I find that to actually be more transparent than having a bill hide behind a legislator. Legislator, I don't know, Jones has a bill, and you really don't know who's really behind that bill. The system that we have now, someone can go before a committee and they can ask for a bill, and the committee decides whether they're going to accept that bill as a committee bill, and that goes into the report for that bill. So anybody can look at the report, they're all online, and see who actually requested that bill. If you just had a sponsor, Representative Jones, you might never know who's behind that bill. So I think our system actually is very transparent. As far as asking for votes to be recorded, that would have helped me a lot when I was working on bills, to see exactly who supported and who opposed a bill. But I think the system is now that you can ask for votes to be recorded. Somebody on the committee can do that. So,
Okay, thank you. We have another question that has a 2-minute answer, although it may not take that long. The question is, would you support continuation or repeal of KSA 76-731A? And in case you haven't gotten your Kansas statutes memorized yet, that is the statute that allows undocumented Kansas high school graduates to pay in-state tuition at public colleges and universities. And I should have said before, but we're going to start with Mike Amex on this one.
So go back to the last part of the question, that they would be allowed?
The statute that allows undocumented
Right.
Kansas high school graduates to pay in-state tuition.
Yes.
Okay.
That's basic, the answer is yes, I would.
Okay, it didn't take 2 minutes. We'll go on to Cynthia Smith. That's fine.
okay, the question was, would we allow it to stay on the books?
Would you support continuation or
Continuation.
repeal?
Okay, well, this is an issue that the legislature debates year after year after year. It always comes up because there are some that want to get rid of this. I think it's really good for our state and for our communities to give these young people access to a college education. To pay in-state tuition is not a free college tuition, but it does give them the access to the system. So based on what I've heard over the years, I think it's a system that's working. It's not terribly expensive for the state to do that, and I think the benefits outweigh the costs. And that's always going to be my barometer for whether I vote for something.
After seeing how that question was worded, I feel like we ought to go back to Mike and just clarify that you would support continuation of that policy, right, with your yes answer?
And continuation means it allows them to pay the in-state.
Continue to pay in-state tuition.
Absolutely.
Okay, I
Yeah.
just, because when I reread the question, it was a little bit unclear, so anyway, thank you. All right, let's go next to Thea.
Thank you. So immigrants in Kansas contribute hundreds of millions of dollars per year to state and local taxes. Undocumented and DACA students alone contribute $80 million. But they also have to buy things, and immigrant-led households in Kansas have nearly $4 billion in spending power. And they start businesses. In 2015, over 32,000 immigrant business owners accounted for 25% of all self-employed Kansans, and they generated $265 million in business income. They're not coming to take our jobs, they're coming to create jobs. So should we let the children of immigrants who graduated from Kansas schools, who have lived here for at least 3 years, and who sign a waiver swearing to naturalize if and when they are allowed to, should we let those kids attend college for a reasonable cost? I think that we should. An educated workforce will grow our economy and entice businesses to locate in Kansas.
Okay, and to Jim.
To get to the point, yes, I would. And a lot of it has to do with the economics of it. There's less than 600 students that are receiving these benefits right now. And over 80% of those students are going to community college or in some form of a trade. They're not going to places like KU and K-State. Very few of them are. They're learning trades. It's been estimated that it will cost the state about $2.4 million. But in lost revenue, if those were denied, it would cost the state $14 million. You know, they are mainly DACA kids. I wish that we could get the federal government to address this issue and take care of that. Those kids are going to be here, in my opinion. So I think they need the opportunity if they can. They want to learn. They want to learn a trade, and that's what most of them are, learning a trade. So no, I'm not. I would have supported.
Okay. We have another kind of short answer question here. You can take up to 2 minutes, but again, you may not need that much, and we'll go first to Thea on this one. It's about discrimination. Should the state provide tax dollars to faith organizations that discriminate against the LGBTQ community?
The day that my opponent voted to legalize discrimination in Kansas is the day that I decided to run for office. Now, he says that it wasn't about denying equality to our community members, but he also supports banning same-sex marriage. The Adoption Protection Act allows foster and adoption agencies to deny services to anyone who violates their religious beliefs. This bill is about protecting a state contractor from litigation because they knew their ongoing discrimination would eventually be challenged in court. The bill doesn't actually specify who they can discriminate against, so it's left to the judgment of the state contractor. It might be LGBT people. The law leaves it open to Jewish, Muslim, single parents, people of color. It depends on the beliefs of the organization. Now, my opponent didn't just vote for this bill. He was on the committee that brought it to the floor. Two committee members of color brought up these concerns about the unlimited potential for discrimination, and my opponent effectively silenced their voices through a procedural vote called Agree to Disagree. This bill is, without question, the wrong direction for Kansas. It's so bad, no senator put their name on it. It's a committee-generated bill. So to answer your question, no, I don't support Kansas tax dollars going to an organization that discriminates against any community.
All right, Mr. Carlskent.
Yes, I'd like to address that. First of all, the bill that my opponent, took the lengthy statement on, the bill has nothing to do, first of all, I'm not prejudiced towards any group. The reason why I voted for it was how it could potentially hurt kids. The bill that was passed, it doesn't affect adoption one way or the other right now. If it would have gone the other direction, the only way it would have affected us if there would have been an executive order for someone saying that faith-based organizations could no longer adopt. I did not want the opportunity of eliminating agencies in our state from adopting kids. That was why I voted against it. So to get to the point, this bill there's no change in it whatsoever from what we're doing right now, and I voted against it to prevent kids from being hurt and eliminating adoptions. Thank you.
The question then is to provide tax dollars to faith-based organizations that discriminate against LGBTQ community. So you're saying no, just
They don't discriminate against LGBT communities. They do. For example, let's talk about it. It's Catholic Charities and the Lutheran organization. The tax dollars go towards the parents of those that are adopting.
okay. Then we'll go next to the 45th district and to Cynthia Smith.
Well, there are a number of services that faith-based organizations provide in our state and do a good job of providing in our state, and probably do a better job than the state could do itself. And running this adoption program is one of those. Actually, the adoption programs in our state were initially only done by the faith-based community. So I agree with the legislature's action. I don't think if you talk about discrimination and churches, you're saying that there's an awful lot of churches that it's part of their faith, for example, not to support same-sex marriage. Are we going to say that we're not going to allow those churches to be in the state? What dollars they get from the state are important for them to be able to do these services. I know when I worked for a faith-based hospital system and safety net clinics, I ran up against this issue because they do get a little bit of money from the state to do some of the services that they do, but they do not ask for documentation of citizenship. And when those bills were introduced, I was the one that went to the leaders of the legislature and the bill sponsors and the committee leaders and said, hey, you realize what you're doing. You're taking health care away from people, and that's really not a very good idea. And they agreed with that and pulled that legislation. And I had to do that 2 or 3 times because people just have to think it through. They just have to think through what it is this bill does or doesn't do. And I think that we'd be going down a slippery slope that we don't want to go, to withhold state money from organizations like churches that may, you say, discriminate, that just may stand by their religious held beliefs.
Okay, and to Mike Amex.
In answer to your question, no, I would not support anyone receiving state aid if they're allowed to discriminate. But as was just said, there's a lot that goes into all of this, and you need to read very closely to that. But I will not, in answer to the question, no, I would not support tax dollars to go to organizations just, for the sake of discrimination. So, but here again, you need to be very, very careful about what is in all of this. So here's one of those times where I say no, and I believe no, because I just don't believe in discrimination one bit. But the truth of the matter is you got to be careful, make sure that you're not creating other problems down the road.
Okay. We're going to finish up with a question about economic development. It's another 2-minute answer. We'll start with Cynthia on this one. What economic development efforts would you favor at the state level to help spur growth in high-tech bioscience research and development? Should those efforts include public-private partnerships similar to the former Kansas Bioscience Authority?
I think we ought to look at the Bioscience Authority and the work that it did. We had very bad leadership in that organization during the short time it was in existence, but that doesn't mean that it isn't a really positive thing. And I think that we could maybe partner with the university. There's a lot of similarities between what they were doing and what they're doing at KU campus, for example. I think there is benefit to the state from being a place that those companies want to start and grow. I talked to one of the scientists that was working at KU, and he explained to me how good that is for the university, you know, that they're looking for the next Gatorade, and that's really the financial support that universities use to operate. It's not just tuition, but it's that work that's really important to keep a university the high-quality organization that it is. But I also think the state needs to focus on other things like trades, being sure that we have the skilled labor in trades in order for our communities to thrive. We hear from a lot of small businesses, even in Lawrence, in the Douglas County area, that don't have the skilled labor that they need. So things that we're doing like the Peasley Center are also really important things for economic development and for being sure that our businesses can succeed here.
Okay, thank you. And Mike Amex?
As a member of a local governing body that was involved with those kind of partnerships you talk about with biosciences, the city, the county, the state went together, and we've got our bioscience building on West Campus, something that's been very popular and something that we've already had our first expansion doing. You know, it's something that works, and you know, over time we will be able to foster those new businesses that come in and startups off the university and wherever they come from. But that's going to be it. It's one of those times where my opponent and I are going to agree a lot on as we look at a workforce that is educated, that is trained. I was on the original board of Peasley Tech. And, you know, knew Dwayne Peasley very well, and realized that technical education is something that is so important to be able to have people that are trained in all parts of education and ready to go to work, along with the education that we get at the University of Kansas, so that we have a complete workforce and people ready to go. Businesses look at that. They want to make sure that their investment in a state and in local areas, that is one of the things that we can put on the table, is that we've got a trained and educated workforce. So something I'm very supportive of. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll skip down to the 42nd District and Jim Carlskin.
Could you repeat the question,
You
please?
bet. What economic development efforts would you favor at the state level to help spur growth in high-tech bioscience research and development? Should those efforts include public-private partnerships similar to the former Kansas Bioscience Authority?
Thank you for
Sure.
repeating the question.
No
You know, I would support that type of, you know, public-private partnerships. You know, there's bonds that can be issued by the state. I think anything to, you know, to spur economic growth, to get things going. You know, there's a lot of talent out there that I think we need to tap into. So yes, I would support it, and through the legislature to look at those and give that support. Thank you.
Okay, Anthea Perry.
Sure. So if we want our economy to grow and thrive, we must be a place that people want to live. My husband was at one point offered a job in Florida, and we didn't even consider it. Why? Was because of the bad reputation of Florida schools. We want our children to have a good education. And if we want to grow our economy and attract businesses to the state, it's critical that we have an educated workforce. So that is a resource that we can actually control. And it must be fair and equitable across the state. So I'm the product of rural schools, and it's very important to me that children in Tonganoxie and Clay Center and Goodland all have access to a high-quality education, just like the kids in Johnson County. I'd like to rebuild so that our kids and our grandkids will want to stick around. In rural Kansas, net neutrality is an important economic driver. Businesses need equal access to markets. Farmers need fast, equal access to buy and sell their crops and livestock. Several states have enacted net neutrality laws. Kansas tried. My opponent voted against it. Given the opportunity, I would support net neutrality legislation.
Okay. That is our final question, and so we are going to conclude our forum by thanking our candidates. And if everybody wants to give them a round of applause for the people who are here, I think that would be great. We'd like to thank our audience also for joining us for this forum and the City of Lawrence for helping us arrange our forum here today. Once again, you can rewatch this forum or tell your friends to watch it anytime on the city's YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/LawrenceKSvideo/. And we urge you all to get out and vote on November 6th. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's go. You have a big audience. I know, but it's some audience. It makes me feel better. It's like instead of just trying to do it to a camera or something, so it makes me feel better. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, you can ask questions if you want. But
I don't know if we want to go there. Okay, all right, let's get going. Hi, we'd like to welcome you to the Voter Education Coalition education session, I guess we would call it, on court elections and appointments. My name is Ann Gardner, and I am going to share a little bit of information and help get the support of an expert that we brought in to talk about this. On the ballot this year, voters will be asked whether 7 judges on the Kansas Court of Appeals and 3 judges on the Douglas County District Court should be retained in their positions. And in talking to people, we found out that they had a lot of questions about how judges are appointed or elected, how they get those jobs, what it means when we are asked to retain them, how often that happens, and just lots of things. And so rather than try to interview the judges themselves, we decided to just bring in our own expert on this. And so Judge Bob Fairchild has joined us today. He has practiced law in Lawrence for 23 years and served as a Douglas County District Judge for 20 years, including some years as the Chief Judge, before he retired in 2016, and he continues to serve as a senior judge. He was an adjunct professor of law at KU for 24 years, so he is going to be able to answer all our questions about the court system.
Sure.
So thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
no problem.
First, if we can just talk a little bit about the overall structure of the state court system and how the judges at all those levels are elected, appointed. Yeah, you got it.
Okay, well, we have 4 types of courts in Kansas, and one of them is the one I'm not going to talk about is the municipal courts. And municipal courts are like Lawrence has a municipal court. Some of you may be acquainted with that court firsthand by having gotten a
Traffic
ticket.
tickets and
Yes,
things like that. Yes,
right.
okay.
And they do handle some things that are misdemeanors, such as possession of marijuana or something like that, and that varies, from city to city what all they handle. But the 3 that we're going to be concerned about are the district court, which is the court here in Lawrence, which is a trial level court, and then the Court of Appeals, which considers questions of law that are brought before it by litigants in the district courts, and then the Supreme Court. And, jokingly, we sometimes say that the Court of Appeals we get the first guess, Court of Appeals gets the second guess, and the Supreme Court gets the final guess. Because when we're dealing with some issues that have never come before the court, we do the best we can to interpret the law, but there are 2 other, like district judges do, but then there are 2 other courts that can look at it, and the ultimate say is the Supreme Court. Obviously, we're not going to talk about the federal courts because the federal courts have totally different jurisdiction. They have a different system, and they cover things that our local courts don't cover. The voters don't get to vote on those judges, so it's really not relevant to our discussion.
Okay.
Okay, now, the 3 courts, the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeals, and the District Court are selected in different ways. Supreme Court and District Courts are the same except for their term. The Supreme Court has a 6-year term. The Supreme Court justices have a 6-year term. district court judges have a 4-year term. And then the Court of Appeals, the district court and the Supreme Court are founded based on provisions of our Constitution. And so their term, their method of selection is established in the Constitution. The Court of Appeals is a creature of statute. And so the legislature then controls sorry, my coat's making noise.
That's all right.
Controls what their terms are, they control, how they're chosen, et cetera. The Supreme Court, or the Court of Appeals, up until about, maybe 6 years ago.
It's under Brownback, so
Yeah,
that's right.
it was selected the same way as district court judges, and their terms were and still are 4 years. So let me talk about the Supreme Court and the district court first, and then we'll go back and talk about how they were, what the change was in the way they were selected. Okay, there are 31 judicial districts in Kansas, and we have a little map here that shows all the different judicial districts. The dark lines outline the districts and show you the counties that are in the districts. If you look at 15 and 17 and 25, 24, you will see how many counties are in those districts. The chief judge, there's one of those 17, I think, has one district judge. DMJ stands for District Magistrate Judge. The difference between a district judge and a district magistrate judge is the district judge must have a law degree. They must be law trained. A district magistrate judge may be law trained, but they don't have to be law trained. And the district magistrate judges have a limited jurisdiction. They can handle juvenile cases, they can handle limited civil cases, small claims, some child visitation issues, some child support issues, misdemeanor offenses, but they cannot handle major civil cases. They can't handle felony cases. They can do preliminary hearings, but they can't handle any jury trials. Now, there was one change in that the law-trained magistrate judges can do upper-level civil cases and some jury trials on occasion, but that's really the only variation. So we have a law that requires that there be a judge in every county in the state, and that means there has to be 105 judges at a minimum. Those district magistrate judges in these large districts are the judge that's in all those little counties. And the district judge must be, the district judge who's the chief judge varies within where they're located, varies within those judicial districts.
But Douglas County is a district all in itself.
And there
It's District 7, is that right?
It's 7th Judicial District. There are 5 single county districts. And they're the 5 largest population centers within the state. Now, you'll notice that if you look at it, that Leavenworth County and Atchison County are the 1st Judicial District. And they have the same number of district judges as we do. And when they put the 2 counties together, they decided that their caseload was about the same as ours is. And so that, at least at the time they did it, There has been talk about redistricting, but we're not going there either.
So the thing on this map that's kind of interesting is that the dark
That-
shaded counties are the ones that use a merit selection process like Douglas County, but there are, all the white counties here use a political process where they elect their judges, right?
That's correct. And it's nonpartisan even there. I mean, although they are, they have, obviously, they usually have a party affiliation, but that's not,
But you don't usually have like a Republican and a Democrat in each of those races, and they don't
No.
declare that on a ballot that is
No.
Republican? Okay,
yeah.
okay.
And the way the merit selection, which is what they call the process that's used in Douglas County, the way that works is you have a local commission, and that commission is made up of 6 people and 1 Supreme Court justice. The Supreme Court justice is the departmental justice, and we won't get into departments, but there are, anyway, we have departments that include several
Sometimes you just
districts.
know too much about these things,
Yeah.
I know, okay.
And so that's how the Supreme Court justice is chosen for that particular commission. The commission has chosen 3 non-lawyers that are chosen by the county commission, and 3 lawyers that are chosen by the attorneys who practice in the district, who live in the district and practice in the district. I mean, we have lots of different attorneys that practice in Lawrence, because we've got Kansas City on one side and Topeka on the other side, and,
Does the Bar Association have anything to do with that?
the Bar Association does not.
Okay.
But the lawyers that live in our judicial district and are, well, anyway, they're the ones that get to vote.
Okay,
And the ballots are sent out by the Supreme Court to all the people that are registered. We have a large number of lawyers registered in our district, many of whom don't practice here at all, because we have a lot of people, a lot of lawyers that work in Topeka and live in Lawrence there. That's the biggest influence. We have some that work in Kansas City or Johnson County and live here, both Kansas City, Missouri, and Johnson County. So, and then some that are in Ottawa and live here, and
Right, yeah.
all the surrounding areas. So,
so you have this 7-member nominating committee,
and
or
they
commission? Is
right,
that the right
commission
term?
is-
Okay,
yeah.
all right. And so then what do they do when there's a vacancy on the court?
okay, the Supreme Court justice that's assigned to that commission convenes the commission and sets a date, and they come and they meet, and they then set up time frame, and they send out notices to all the attorneys that are in the district that they are accepting nominations for district court. And so you have to fill out an application and be nominated for the district court position. They then review those, interview. They don't always interview all of the people who apply. They select how many they want to interview. And they send a maximum of 3 names to the governor's office after they've met. And the meetings are open meetings, so you can attend the meetings if you want. There aren't a lot of people that attend, but occasionally somebody attends. And the candidates usually have a group of letters from people that support them. They have to submit a resume that shows what all they've done, what their experience is. And the members of the commission are usually very active, and they will follow up on recommendations and get information about the candidates.
And
So,
my recollection is that they will release the names of everybody who has expressed an interest in the position, as well as the 3 names that they forward to the governor. Is that correct?
they usually, yes, partially.
Okay.
If there were people that they didn't, well, actually, they usually give a list of the people that have applied.
That was my memory.
Yeah, they
okay.
do.
Because that's changed a little bit with the Court of Appeals now, so I wanted to make that.
Well, yeah, no, it has. I was thinking that they limited it to the ones they were going to interview, but that's not true.
Okay.
Now, you didn't usually see the name, or didn't used to see the names being published because the numbers were pretty big. I think when I applied, there were as many as 40
Oh, okay.
that applied.
Okay.
And, the numbers now have been 15, 16, something like that,
Okay.
usually for one of the positions.
Okay. And so they send three names to the governor?
They don't have to send three.
Or up to three?
Up to three.
Okay. And then the governor selects?
And the
from
governor
that?
selects from those three.
Okay.
And the governor has Kansas Bureau of Investigation do a background check. The candidates then send additional letters of support to the governor. And then the governor generally interviews all of the candidates. But there's been some difference in how different governors did that. Some of them would have somebody else from their office do that. Now, when I was nominated for district judge, both times I was interviewed by the governor, so.
Okay. So, and as you were saying, that process is about the same for the state Supreme Court. It's a different commission. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
I was nominated for the Supreme Court 3 times, so yeah, I can.
Okay.
They have 4 members, it's a 9-person panel. 4 members who, again, are lawyers and are chosen by the state bar, not the bar, but the people who are admitted to the bar in the state. And again, that is all determined by the Supreme Court nominating, well, by the officials. There's a person within the clerk of the appellate courts who, gathers that information and sends out all of the notices and all of the, the commission. We actually get ballots to vote for people who are in our area for the commission, and then.
Do they do that by, is it by congressional district?
Yes, I think
Okay.
so.
That you have to have one attorney member from each congressional district in the state?
And I think you have to have a lay member from each of those.
That sounds right, yeah.
And anyway, then the other person is a lawyer who is specifically chosen as the chairman or chair of the Supreme Court or its appellate court nominating commission, except they have a more limited role now. They don't do the Kansas Court of Appeals. That's what they used to be
Right.
called. Now they really are the Supreme Court nominating commission.
Right.
And they do the same thing, same process, and they send 3 names to the governor. And the governor then
governor
chooses
appoints.
from those 3 names.
Okay.
Frankly, it is more political at the governor's, at the
At the
governor's
Supreme Court,
place.
yeah.
Than it is on the district court level.
Yeah.
On the district court level, it's not as political as it is when you're nominated for the Supreme Court.
And the process for those courts is set up by constitutional right. So, but a few years ago, as you alluded to, because it was set up by statute, they changed the process for appointing judges to the Kansas Court of Appeals.
That's correct. And what they've done is go to more of the federal system, which is that the governor nominates someone and sends the name to the Senate, and the Senate votes on whether to confirm that nomination.
They hold some hearings of some kind in the Judiciary Committee of the Senate, right? And then, and they ratify or, approve that, the nomination more like they do at the federal level, like we've just seen with the latest process. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the way
Okay.
it's done.
And then all of those judges then, at all the levels, not the ones who are elected in other districts because they're standing for election anyway, but all the judges that are appointed stand for retention.
Right.
And that's what shows up on your ballot. And so maybe you can kind of explain how that works.
Okay, one of the judges that is on the ballot is Amy Hanley, and she took my place when I retired. And within 2 years of being appointed, she has to stand for retention. But the rest of the people, once you stand for retention, it's 4 years from the time that you were retained that you stand for retention again.
Okay.
And so, and that gives you the right to say, as a voter, to say, yes, this person should be retained, or no, this person should not be retained. No one's allowed to run against them. The judges are not allowed to put out political notices or advertisements or anything, to support their position unless there's a group who attacks their retention. And at that point, they can, campaign.
Can respond.
Yeah, respond.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So,
It's really unusual for somebody not to be retained. If somebody's not retained, then it just what happens after that? Is there automatically then an opening on the court, or is there any process?
yeah, that's what happens, and they go through the same process that they went through before.
To nominate
The
somebody.
commission nominates someone, and
So it automatically creates a vacancy in that position if
Right.
a judge isn't retained in an election. So it's an important check and balance for voters. I mean, it's not common for somebody not to be retained, but that certainly voters can do that if they feel like a judge is really out of bounds, kind of.
And there have been examples of that in California, recent examples in California, and a few years ago in Iowa with Supreme Court justices. And unfortunately, sometimes voters will hone in on one case, and instead of looking at all that judge has done, they look at whether they were on the dissenting side or the side that wrote the opinion. And there's a famous one from Tennessee, and they attacked her in the last 2 weeks with all these ads that they'd been preparing, but until that first ad ran, she couldn't respond, and so within 2 weeks, she really didn't have the opportunity. She did not author the opinion. It had to do with a capital punishment issue, and it was clear to everybody that had a legal background that the decision was correct, but it was everybody on there, but she was the only one that was up for retention. Everybody that voted for the decision, was fair game, but she's the only one that was up for retention and wasn't retained.
So what you were saying about the judge that was appointed to replace you, I think those judges, they have to stand for retention at the next
Yeah.
election
Yeah.
after they're
Right.
appointed,
Yeah,
right?
which
Even if
is
they,
2 years or
even if,
so,
yeah, even if it's, they've only been on the court for a
Yeah.
year or whatever, they have to stand for retention the next election.
Right.
And then after that, at the district court level, it's every 4 years?
Every 4 years.
And then the higher courts, you said Supreme Court's 6 years,
And the Court of Appeals is 4.
is 4, okay, so.
And even though their process is different, they have the same thing, where they stand for retention
Okay,
every 4 years. And then, so the same rules apply, but if one of them vacates, then the process would be the process of the governor nominating, sending the name to the Senate.
okay, okay. So let's talk just a little bit about the structure of Douglas County District Court, what the role of the chief judge is. And then I was wondering if you could tell us about, there's different divisions within the district. And do they deal with different caseloads, or how does that work exactly?
Yes, and that varies dramatically from district to district, what they do. These smaller districts, the judges basically do everything.
Right.
But, okay, the chief judge is basically the administrator for the court within that district. And as you can see from the other map, that the 15th Judicial District has 7 districts. The courts are funded in an interesting way because the judges are all salaried state employees. And the district court clerks, supposedly all of the personnel within the court is funded by the state. But everything else, all the other expenses are paid by the county. So the building, the supplies, and then many counties like Douglas County provide a lot of employees in addition to the ones from the state because the state system's been underfunded and, for a long time. And so, anyway, those judges have to deal with 7 different county commissions to try to, get their funding for all these courthouses, all the, the personnel and stuff in the different courts. So it's a big job. Some of the, how are they chosen? They're chosen by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court does talk to all the other judges, district judges within the district, get their feedback, but ultimately it's not a seniority system. In fact, I was not the senior judge when I was appointed. I first became a judge in '96, and I was appointed chief judge when Judge Malone retired from that job in 2002, and then I was chief judge from 2002 to 2016, which is way too long. But it's, you have all the personnel issues that go with the court. I mean, we had at least 40 state employees and between part-time and full-time other employees. I mean, there were times that it was up near 70 or 80. And so that's a lot of people that technically you're employed by. And in our district, the chief judge does not get a break in the chief judge's docket at all. My docket was the same as everybody else's. Now, you asked about how it's specialized. Some in Wichita, the chief judge only does those cases the chief judge wants to take. Same is similar than that in Kansas City, Kansas. Johnson County, they may get a little break. And then the elected districts, most of them are smaller, with the exception of Wyandotte County is an elected district, and Sedgwick County is an elected district. So, but all the other large counties are well, let me see, Reno County also is elected, I think. Yeah, it is.
Is that purely, we're backing up a little bit, but is that just purely by the county option? I mean, would they have to, how do the counties decide
By
which
the
way?
district.
The district, or by the district, I mean.
Yeah.
So the districts would, if you were a district where they're elected now and you wanted to switch to it being appointed, would that be an election issue within that district? Or if we decided in here that we didn't want to appoint, that we wanted to elect judges, that you could put that on the ballot within the district?
Yeah, and there's some provision for how many signatures you got to get to do that. But in the not too distant past, they tried to change in Johnson County because they're a retention district, and they were not able to get it done. They've tried it in Shawnee County, Leavenworth County, or those districts. Leavenworth is Leavenworth-Atchison. And so usually it's some group that thinks that they want judges to be elected because they will have more control over the judges. I mean, that's really usually their motivation for that.
So back to the chief judge. Does the chief judge then assign cases to the individual judges within the district?
Yes and no. I mean, if there was a disagreement among the judges, the chief judge could do that. Normally, they do it by kind of consent of the judges as a whole. I mean, we would talk about it, and then I would ultimately decide who handles what cases. And you asked about specialization or different. The main area that you see specialized, the two main areas, are family law cases. Often you will have a specific family law division or divisions, and juvenile, if your county's or your district's big enough, juvenile may be specialized. civil and criminal. In Johnson County, there are domestic courts, criminal courts, juvenile courts, and, okay, I think I hit them all.
Okay.
And, you know, that really varies from county to county. Here, Gene Shepherd, you know, really enjoyed doing, or preferred doing the juvenile and the family, and so she did that for many years, and the rest of us did half civil, half criminal, by and large. There was a period of time, short period, like 3 years, where I did only civil because the new judge that came on came out of, I got to remember which one it was. Oh, I know. That was when Jean retired, and we were going to have to divide her docket, and frankly, none of the judges wanted to take her docket. And so what we did was we had 2 judges that divided the divorce docket, basically child custody cases. And so I just said, your other half of your docket would be whatever you want. Do you want civil or do you want criminal?
Yeah.
And they both wanted criminal, so I took all civil.
So I know that on the county's website, they have all those divisions listed, and it gives some, like, this division does these kind of cases, but it sounds like that's pretty flexible, you know, according to the preferences of each individual judge. And
Yeah, no, well, it is. I mean, you know, ultimately, you know, they may want to they want to get out of that domestic docket all the time, you know, frankly, and so sometimes here comes a new judge. Okay, it's my turn to get, you know, to go back to doing something else. And some of them just prefer doing, you know, specific kinds of things. You know, in our district, for some reason, everybody liked doing criminal. So,
Okay.
you know, we did criminal. A lot of us did half criminal and then did half civil.
Okay, okay. I think we've kind of covered it. We want to get to take a couple of minutes here to tell people about the Douglas County judges that are up for retention. Oh, we're ready? Okay.
No, I want you to talk about that.
Okay, well, let's do that. I think we have a slide here that has pictures of our judges that are, like I said, we have 7 judges from the Court of Appeals that are up for retention, and you can find out a little bit more about them and about the cases they've handled by going to the Judicial website for Kansas, which is just kansascourts.org. And if you go to the Court of Appeals, you can go there and find out a little bit more about their decisions. But we wanted to just take a few minutes to tell you about the 3 Douglas County judges that are up for retention in this coming election. I'm squinting at this. I believe she's on the right is Amy Hanley, who was appointed by Sam Brown back in 2016. She had served as a prosecutor in Saline County from 2002 to 2009, and was the prosecution section chief for the criminal litigation division for Kansas Attorney General Derek Schmidt. Before she came to Lawrence, and like we said, she was appointed in 2016, and since this is the first election after that appointment, she'll be up for retention this year. She received her bachelor's degree from Kansas State University and her law degree from Drake University Law School. In the center is Sally Pokorny, who was appointed by Kathleen Sebelius and sworn in January of 2009. She'd previously been retained in 2010 and 2014. She was a former assistant district attorney in Shawnee County and served as Montgomery County attorney before entering private practice in Lawrence, and then was appointed subsequently to that. She received her bachelor's and law degrees both from Washburn University. And then on the left there is Peggy Kittle, who currently serves as the chief judge, took your place as of the 7th Judicial District. She was appointed by Kathleen Sebelius in 2008 and retained in 2010 and 2014. She had served for 12 years as an assistant district attorney in Wyandotte and Douglas County before being appointed as a judge pro tem in Douglas County District Court in 2001, and I think that was when your caseload was at the point where you just needed, the county hired her as opposed to her being appointed as a new district judge because you didn't have that position, right? Right.
Yeah, and the judges of Douglas County are the ones that selected her.
Okay,
But the
as a
county.
pro tem.
The county pays her, yeah, and actually the chief judge is the one that appoints her, but we did it by.
Okay,
you know.
so anyway, that term, the judge pro tem service began in 2001, and then she was appointed by the governor in 2008 to the district judge position. And she received both her bachelor and law degrees at the University of Kansas. So that will tell you just a little bit about those judges. I'm sure that you can find some more information about them if you want to. We hope that this has been helpful in explaining that system a little bit, and you won't be quite so puzzled when you find those retention names on your ballot on November the 6th. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to Judge Fairchild for his assistance. And I think we're complete. Thank you.
As you say, it's a disadvantage.